Welcome to Fontribute, where we talk about fonts and their attributes. Fontribute. I'm Thomas Jockin.
And I'm Erin McLaughlin.
Hey, Erin. Good to see
Hi.
you again.
Hello.
So, Erin, what are we talking about today?
Today we are going to compare two typefaces by DSType. Now, these are both high contrast typefaces. We've got Keiss Big, which is kind of a Scotch Roman sort of typeface, and Keiss Display, which was inspired by Caslin's types. They're both high contrast. They're good for editorial or, for magazines, for large sizes. That's what we're looking at. So let's kind of compare and see what we like about each one.
You got it.
Cool.
Cool. So, Erin, do you want to jump in first? You want me to reply back on what I see?
So if we look at these two typefaces, you might think at first, oh, they're very similar, but we already can see some different sorts of constructions. Let's take a look here at the kind of this join here. We've got this very, oh golly, super high contrast on Keiss. I don't even want to draw on it because it's going to disappear into nothingness. But you can see that the curve is very kind of round up here and has a very tiny, small juncture here, whereas the inner curve of this N is a little bit more flat. So that's one difference that I'm seeing. Also take a look at the angled top here of the N, whereas here it's the stroke here is a flat top. So we'll see that across the rest of the typeface, I'm sure. And then also just noticing how thin the strokes are as they kind of taper downward. I guess I probably covered it all. What do you see?
You covered a lot, but you see in your intro, you talked about how one was a Scotch, excuse my brain, a Scotch, right? And this one was more a Caslon inspired.
Yeah.
Right? So what made you come to those conclusions or statements? Do you think some of those attributes you talked about were related to those terms you said?
I would say so, and I literally read their descriptions of how they describe the typefaces, so I decided, hey, they told me this, so I'm going to announce it to everyone. But yes, I would agree that this sort of this sort of Caslin typeface is a little bit more, it's more kind of inspired by calligraphy, and this is more kind of, how would you describe it? Like, not machine, but it's drawn in a very different style. This is kind of more influenced by pen motion and how that would work with an actual writing tool, whereas this is more kind of a mechanical constructed sort of form, especially with this would be very hard to replicate. If you couldn't really replicate that if you were drawing it with a pen. Sorry, this is my bad example of pen drawing. You're very good at that. Why don't you do a demo?
Well, yeah. So I guess the first thing I would say is, so you're saying basically the idea that that right, the Scotch, these are both seem to be transitionals, right? Because Caslon, in my mind, if I understand my type classifications, Caslon could be considered a transitional, right? It's something between old style and moderns. And the Scotch Roman seems to be much more a modern, right? Kind of a Dito,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
We can see that because of this kind of flag serif versus this kind of homogenized serif, flag serif over here in Keiss Big, if I pronounce that right. As you said, the calligraphic pen work, right? Basically, notice mainly you can see that because again, this kind of flatness in this counter versus the arch up here, that mimics, right? Basically, I follow a pen. Right, contrast that to maybe a pointed pen if you're going to use a Norzai terminology. But notice this is a very different kind of drawing, right? Different kind of relationship of contrast between the thicks and thins between these two, right? So within the spectrum of transitional, right, which is a kind of broad term to describe this kind of style of type, one can speak more towards a Garamond, right? So if I do that Garamond, kind of A. If I draw this, not too bad. Versus Dito.
Wow, those are very clear illustrations.
Are you making fun of me?
A little bit.
Whatever.
No, it's hard with these pens, but
with a trackpad is a little challenging. But the point is, they're within a kind of broad term, concept of called transitional, but within them there's kind of two breakdowns. There's like, as referenced, as Erin pointed out, Caslon for over here, right, and Scotch Roman for this one.
I think it's as clear as mud. I don't think either of us are just, anyway, sorry everybody. Look at your type history textbooks. That'll help you understand. No, sorry.
No issue.
Sorry everybody. Well, how about let's look at the O.
Yeah, let's
look at
proceed
the O.
forward.
I think so. And here, here they look very, very, very similar with the O. In terms of the differences being mainly just this has a lot more contrast and it's a bit more kind of like round in shape. This is a little bit taller. The X height is a little bit taller on the Keiss display. I read their description of the typeface. They said, so it was inspired by Caslon, but they said they wanted to increase the X height and reduce the ascender and descender length on the Keiss display because they wanted it to look more modern and like kind of fit in with editorial use. I didn't get as much detail about their design decisions for Keiss Big, but as you can see, it is a lower X height. This is a lot kind of more rounded. And as we observed with that N, that there's a lot more contrast happening with the Keiss Big.
Yeah, and kind of follow up, kind of notice kind of the more kind of this profile of this curve versus this curve. Basically, this is more square, right? This one's a more square approach in the curve profile versus shallower in Keiss Big. So I could tell, I see that's one of the main differences between them. But there's a lot of similarities. I would agree with that too. Right? Kind of both handle a very dramatic shift in contrast from the thicks to the thins. Right, and we would say that Keiss has more contrast because the jump between the two is larger compared to Quase display.
Excellent. Cool. Yay. Wow. Here's where I think it gets quite fun. You can really kind of see the differences here when we connect these bowl shapes to a stem. Now you can see in Keiss, like there's absolutely no thick stroke kind of transition in here. They bring this thin line all the way up to that vertical stroke, whereas here in Keiss it's a bit more, like Thomas said, kind of more transitional, and it has a little bit more of that implied pen motion, where if you were drawing this with a pen, it would get fat again if there was, kind of an axis going a little bit more with a little bit more of an angle. You would have thick, it would thin out, it would go thick again. Whereas here with Keiss, it's like a bit more vertically stressed. So that kind of, and very mechanical in how it's composed. That has nothing to do with what a pen would do if you were a scribe, calligrapher type person. So tell me more about what you see.
Yeah, kind of similar to what we see from pens that or contrast that are holographic. Notice there's a little adding of weight over here, right, as Erin demonstrated as well. Just contrast that, and likewise how this transition down here has been handled between the two. This reinforces Erin's point. Also, again, see kind of the uniformity of the approach, right, on these terminals in Keiss Big versus more differentiation between the ascender descender terminals in Keiss display.
Nice.
Yeah, so those are my observations I can see so far.
Very cool.
Yeah, also you can also see the X height discussion, right? Notice actually we can see Quase has a larger X height, right?
There you go. Very cool.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Time.
So I thought this was just such a unique feature that I really thought the B should be in our slides. So, both of these Bs have a little bit of a, oh golly, what is the term for this? Do you remember?
Spur.
Spur, thank you. What is wrong with me? We got a little spur action happening on both of them, but this Keiss, I've never quite seen one quite this dramatic. It goes, look at this angle, it goes all the way up, almost like, almost to halfway up the height of the B. I just thought that was so unique. So that also really, this is clearly for display use. This is a very distinguishing feature of the typeface, I thought. Very unusual to see. Whereas in Keiss, it's a little more kind of traditional approach where you do have a little bit of a thick, a thick stroke kind of blending it into the bowl of the B.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, what you would expect, I think, would be right, that transition right here, right? Kind of mimicking what you would do here. But that's not the case. So I'm very curious how this is going to look in text, because that is a super crazy move. Likewise, we can see, all the other statements. I kind of notice how this profile is handled versus this one, right? One is more calligraphic in sourcing. One is way more modern, kind of Dito-esque in its approach, kind of that vertical stress, rapid transition of weights into the joint, over to the bowl, right? Over to the main stroke area. Let's contrast that to the movements over here. And likewise, again, the kind of points of look at how the ascenders are handled. One is a flat serif, one is just flattened out. Yeah, so those are the observations I see so far on this.
Very cool. Ooh, why don't you jump in here, please?
Totally. So definitely the first thing I'd see is notice the slope, right, in this terminal versus the kind of more even terminal left and right in Keiss Big. So definitely this one speaks more to Caslon sourcing. I see that clearly in there. In that direction, this one again feels more like a modern, like a as they expect, a Scotch Roman makes sense, right? This approach I'm seeing right here. So that was hi there. That was one of the prominent things I'm seeing. Also, we can see, notice this transition in the terminal. Right, so this kind of teardrop shape and then an abrupt motion over versus this kind of caving in and then back out again. So their approaches are different in that way. And lastly, I keep getting the wrong thing. And the last thing is, notice how the terminals are handled. This is almost vertical terminal, right, in the tail area versus the more angled over here on this terminal. So it seems I can see the program of the project of each design being applied to the letter A so far. Erin, what do you see?
Nice. Yeah, I agree. I think this was a good example of showing it's a little more clear to see kind of some of the stress differences with the A, where you can see a little bit more of that angle happening here, whereas Keiss is more of a bloop, bloop, that's kind of what happens in modern style typefaces, that it's more of a upright sort of stress happening, whereas this retains some of the angles happening in calligraphy. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's about, I mean, I think you've covered most of it. Do you want to go to the next letter and then speak a little bit more? I've been yakking my face off.
Yeah,
What's our next
it's all good.
T.
Ah, yes. So again, notice that, again, this is where we can really confirm the contrast system is different between the two. Or just one's way more dramatic, right? This Keiss Big is super dramatic. Look at how the crossbar is handled in its weight versus the main stem stroke. Also, we can see, again, this kind of approach where we have this kind of open top versus a flag top. Kind of this triangular shape, right? This is much more calligraphic in sourcing. This is pulling more from the moderns genre typefaces. So that was like those are the first things I see dramatically between the two of these right now.
Perfect. Great observations. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of the differences in how this, I mean, this is really dramatic. The difference in contrast there, that's going to be pretty cool. And also to note, like, if you're a little looking at things a little bit more closely, if you are a type designer or something, just check out the crossbar of the T here in this case display. The same stroke width of the tail here was not used for this crossbar. It was a little bit thicker here to make sure that it would still be more visible in text, I imagine. And I guess just because historically that's kind of the norm of what you see in this style. Whereas here, no, that didn't matter. They just kept it really thin because they know it's going to be used at a big size, and you'll hopefully still be able to see this on your screens as you're watching our video here. I hope so. Anyway, woo. I won't dilly-dally. What's our next letter? Do we have another one?
Diagonals.
Super. This is good. Fun to see diagonals in our talks. We don't cover them each time, but I thought this was kind of, obviously a very different approach. We got Keiss Display has a flat bottom, whereas Keiss is very pointy and stuff. So I guess in this case, if you're, new to this type stuff, you'd say, Erin, what the heck are you talking about? You said that Keiss has been using a very vertical and horizontal stress, and here we have points versus flats. Can you explain it? No, I don't know. I can't explain it. Do you know more about type history, Thomas, where you Caslin, whether the the flats on the bottoms of diagonal characters. Do you know about the historical precedent? I don't
Not to
know.
be quite frank with you, not that much.
Okay.
I would think. I think it has to more basically, right? This just seems much more streamlined, right? Basically, I feel, yeah, I don't have much of an opinion on that. I find many more technical reasons you would do one versus the other. Be quite frank with you, I don't have particular historical knowledge on that question.
I'm literally in the other window. I'm like, crap, do they have flat bottoms in Caslin's types? Like, I don't even remember. I don't think they did.
I
But
can't recall.
I mean, might have just been a little bit of a, like a tiny one. But I think because of this extreme weight contrast, that this was kind of the only way to make that sort of thing work. Otherwise, unless you want the W to get extremely wide and have really, huge angles, like, wow, to keep it pointy, I think you kind of have to do this to make it to maintain kind of a more normal width W. You have to break it off somehow. Otherwise, this works. I think because the thins are so much thinner, and I don't know this. Oh, wow! How does this work? Wow, I probably shouldn't think too hard about this. I'm gonna like lose my mind. But I guess the reason this angle is a lot more abrupt, and this kind of maybe this mimics. Remember the weird B with the really extreme
The really
angle?
sharp, yeah, that
I
really
think
sharp ass.
some of these like extreme angles were already established in the typeface, and that's probably why this works with Keiss, and it wouldn't in Keiss. That's my guess, but we might have to see in context.
Yes, I agree.
Cool.
She was.
Take it.
Got it. So the first thing you're definitely going to see is how this ear is handled. That's one of the first things I saw. I love this little ear approach. It's like dip, like peeking out on the side on Quase. Like Keiss, yeah, kind of peeks on top, kind of like boop, peeking out. That's stuff for the first thing you can see. Also, I think it's interesting, again, see how this weight is handled right here? Actually, here, I'm going to clear out so you can see better. Right, this weight zone over here versus here. Notice there's actually dramatically more, there's less weight over here versus this one. I think because of the stress sourcing, right? Kind of how the stress and weight is being distributed. Notice it stays thinner longer, right? Versus more rapidly holding its weight before really rapidly losing it in Keiss Big. That's the first thing I'm seeing so far. Erin, what else are you seeing?
And also notice, like, so this one kind of joins, the imaginary join of where this bottom of the G happens is a little bit more central, whereas here it peeks in the side, which is another reason why that sort of weight contrast is happening. And then also to just observe, there's a lot, like this gets really thick here in the middle, and the kind of the center point of this is further down in terms of, like, I don't know, how do I describe this? Whoop. We'll eliminate that. I think it's interesting to look at the proportions of how things are divided up. Here, there's like a bigger bottom portion of the G bowl. So that's kind of an interesting difference. So I don't know. G's are tricky, and I don't know how things work and why they work, but this is the weight here. There's so much weight that I had to kind of compress this bottom portion of the G and make that a little bit smaller. But I like it. I like it a lot. This is going to be fun to see if we see any more examples of how these relate elsewhere in the typeface. If we take a look at punctuation or something else.
Yes.
Interesting.
All right, let's boogie.
Cool. Boogie woogie.
So the capitals are here.
Yeah. Woo. So these H's, I mean, they look really similar other than just the weight of the, like we said, the weight of those crossbars and those little serif strokes. So, but as you can see, that transitional style top is kind of poking up a little bit higher than in Keiss Big, where the ascender height is the same as the cap height. And as Thomas was saying, we've got the higher X height here in Keiss than in Keiss.
So could not have said it better myself. So it covers all the points, right?
They're really similar in width, though. Like each of these characters, like they're very, very similar. So that's going to be interesting to see. Because I think the reason why I chose these two to compare is that overall, kind of their widths were very similar. But I just thought it'd be interesting to see these details. So Next
Yeah,
slide. Let's see.
I'm,
Oh.
I have a question about this.
Oh.
I'll wait till the end. I'll wait till the end to
I
ask the question.
think I know what you're gonna think. Cool. Yeah, there we go. So this better demonstrates what I was saying, that overall, kind of, I feel that these letter widths are quite similar. There's a lot going on. Oh, do you want to tell me what you're thinking? I think I know what you're thinking.
I mean, it almost seems like they're like designed on the same system. Like they're
I
just like
know.
swappable.
I wonder if someone started with one of these typefaces and then just said, let's just adjust it a lot and make it into a new typeface. That could have happened. It's the same Type Foundry. Maybe they did that as a starting
That's
point.
why I'm asking. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, that could be. Because there's really, there's really not that much. I wonder where the
To be fair, there are differences. To be fair, like for
Oh, yeah.
example, the profiles of the A's, right? This crazy B. I mean, that's the thing. This B is going to be the main question of the day. Will this work in text? That is the question.
Yeah, that's crazy. And the differences between, like we said, the vertical, not the vertical,
Diagonals.
diagonal characters. Like this V is a lot wider here in Keiss display. Interesting.
Yeah, even the T, right? Basically, how these terminals are handled differently.
T,
and the G particularly, like the G, I think it's also one of those particular portions of the Keiss big is it feels different because of that emphasis placed on this and this its sizing.
Yeah, this is also neat. Just another quick note, like we were noticing that this A on Keiss, looking more Caslin style, and also you see the E, how the crossbar of the E, like look how the way it's divided. So that's another kind of giveaway of like what era or what type of genre of typeface we're kind of looking at. A lot of the these shorter counters of the E come from this sort of background. Cool.
Okay.
Neat.
Numbers.
Numbers. Yeah. So
this is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't see too much difference in the punctuation approach. I didn't think it was as interesting, but I thought the numbers had a very different approach. As everyone can clearly see, it doesn't take an expert to see that the Keiss big numerals are a lot more flourishy in display style, whereas Keiss display, it's a lot more kind of not as showy, let's just say.
Yeah, toned down quite a bit, right? Not as enclosing, not always enclosing spaces. Right. Especially like look at this guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Those curls.
These two. Even this going down here. Yeah, really fun choices. And even again, it has a swirl over here. Compare that to this.
Beautiful. So I would say if you have to choose between these two and you need a lot of numbers in your headline, please use Keiss. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. Look at those. Whew.
I gotta agree. Cool. I mean, it's something else to say on those numbers that basically covers all the points. But here we are. We got some text.
So I included this slide to prove you do not want to use either of these typefaces to set text in. That should have been kind of obvious for people who know about type, but if you're new to type, these sorts of high contrast typefaces, they'll make your eyes bleed if you try to read a book in them. So don't really use it for this purpose, but I don't know if we even want to talk about it at this scale. I mainly just wanted to show like this hurts. It's it's better used at a large size. So we can skip past this. This was just for demonstration purposes.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine with me. All right, here we go. Now this is how you would actually use it.
Yay, this is better. Larger size. So then, you can, because at those smaller sizes, these tiny bits, they just disappear and then your eyes, it vibrates. It looks like a stencil almost. But here you can kind of appreciate those fine details. So the Q actually, so that kind of is similar to the B. We were talking about those little points. So here you can kind of see that in context. Here's the B that we thought were so different. So that's interesting as well. Actually, why don't you go ahead, Thomas? Is there something you want to say?
To be quite frank, I'm not sold on that QB situation in Keiss. It's I was waiting for this moment of reveal. Will this work in text? And it's a little extreme. It's a little out of tone. Out of tone with what I expect, like from everything else I'm seeing, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it draws a little too much attention to itself. I would say so.
Yeah, I'm usually one to withhold judgment on typefaces, but this one it's too strong. Like it's too precedent for me. But yeah, so I guess so I think it's interesting to see where the texture changes between the two, right? Because on some levels, like, oh, it's the same thing, but there are differences. So like there's a certain kind of older feeling you get from this one versus the more kind of that modern. If you want to go for that kind of higher fashion feeling, you would go for this one, right? Versus a more yield. I'm over exaggerating. That's a pastiche statement, but I'm just saying between the two designs, even though there's such similarities between them, their secondary tones are very different. Like it just mainly like how the A feels right between the two. Yeah, how this T is drawn, how this T relates to everything else. Yeah, and just even the nature. Like notice it's kind of the weight, extra weight added on versus the E in the Keiss Big, right? The feeling of the type feels very different because of that, from my observations.
Yeah, I agree. And just, we were talking about, since this was, more inspired by pen motion and has a little bit more weight in some of those places than this. Like, I really think it does make a big difference. I mean, I find the Keiss display more visually pleasing at this size. I have one additional slide where it's even bigger, which might be even better for Keiss Big, which is probably why Big is part of the name.
I was gonna say, are you gonna try to sell me on that BQ? Be like, yes, it works.
I don't know, maybe, but no, I think, like, I really like this at this scale, the Keiss. I really enjoy it. And look at the Q. I just have to note that they went the extra mile and made that long tail of the Q. It's very beautiful. But yeah, I mean, they're both obviously they're both really well done, I think, and suit this use really well. I mean, it's hard to pick apart things. Usually we comment on spacing and that sort of topic, but since these are almost virtually the same exact spacing, like it's kind of hard to talk about the differences between that aspect of the type. So it's mostly just the details that Thomas was just describing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh,
there we
bigger.
go. Even bigger. Did I include it? No, I didn't include the crazy B at this size.
The BQ.
But included some all caps as well, just because I thought, maybe someone's going to use it in that sort of context too. So, here, this is also interesting because we can kind of see some of those other differences, the R constructions. We don't spend as much time typically on talking about the capital letters, Thomas and I, because usually we're looking at text sort of typefaces, or typefaces where you're going to reliably use the lowercase a lot more. But then again, in a display font, something like this that's really elegant, you might use this all caps setting. So anyway, disclaimer. Any differences at slightly larger size? Do you like anything better or worse?
I think definitely Keiss Big works better at the larger settings, right? I think maybe even larger, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Right, would be where that type feels most comfortable. Keiss's Quase, that pronunciation is like escaping me.
Keiss, I don't know, they're very similar.
So exactly. See, this is also why I'm kind of thinking, like, dude, did they plan this intentionally as a system? Because the naming is so similar, it's crazy. In the American pronunciation of these names. Anyways, with Quase display, I still think it actually holds pretty well at this size, I would say.
Yeah.
But I think I'm feeling pretty good about it. And I think generally actually the spacing seems pretty solid on this approach. So nothing's standing out to me as super weird about it to even have a discussion about it. Yeah, but like I said, I think Keiss Big would start looking good at this size and probably even more. I'd probably want to even go larger with it, double the size again. I think the reason why I say that is because notice the tininess of that terminal versus this one, for example, right? I feel like this would behave better at larger settings. Like you can get away with it, like versus these guys might get too blobby or just too much, but not really, because it's in proportion this to this, you can see this is much thinner, right?
Nice. Yeah, so everyone watching, use Keiss Big on a billboard or poster or something. Use it huge.
Absolutely huge.
Big. But yeah, Keiss display is quite cool. I mean, it's for a Caslin inspired thing, you like they said in their description, they increase that X height and then reduce the length of the ascenders and descenders, and I think it was a really good translation for this sort of use. I think it looks great. I really like it.
Yeah, I agree.
Very cool. Woohoo.
And I think this is our conclusion.
Yeah, this is our conclusion, side by side. Woo.
High contrast display. Yeah, Erin, what are your last notes about this?
I mean, it is funny. Like I like when we do the wrap up and we look at them again because if you go small, if you go to small size with these, they look very similar. I think because you lose all those little tiny details. But when we looked at them up close, golly, there were so many differences. It's insane. Like I'm just surprised. So whenever you're looking for, I would recommend graphic designers or students or whoever's watching, if you see something with the word display or big in the title, please use it in that context only, and try to just when you're trying to view the typeface on screen, before you purchase a license and stuff, yeah, use it large. See if they have a specimen to download and kind of like check it out so you can see these details, and don't use this text small, please, for the love of God. What are your comments?
Yes. Yeah, and like I said, it's kind of the process of Fontribute is things that may seem so similar initially. Through the investigation, we find out they're actually quite different, right? So I think Quase display really speaks really strongly at the sizes we've seen. It's as Erin pointed out, the decisions to drop the ascender, increase the X height, I think make it really work really well with this model. I think it's a very successful approach of a Caslon transitional model. Well, Keiss big, I think there are some design decisions I question just because of that crazy spur and the BQ to the point. It's like obnoxious to the point. It's insane. But with that said, reasonably drawn, reasonably spaced, but definitely designed for super large settings. I'd probably would use Keiss big at the most maximum sizes possible, right? And as we said before, the numbers in Keiss big are delightful. So please use those super large as well.
Nice. Very cool.
Awesome. Well, Erin, this has been a fun conversation. Thanks for picking out these fonts this week.
Thank you, Thomas. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Everyone have a great week and talk to you all next time. Don't forget to leave comments, ask questions, ask you the certain kind of fonts you want us to investigate and explore. I know we would love feedback from the audience, so please jump on whenever you're ready. Okay, bye.
Bye. Sorry.